What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another Too Good for Theaters video. Today, we're going to be starting off our breakdowns of the 2025 Patriots campaign. Of course, starting off with the first of many, the preseason opener against the Washington Commanders. And boy, was it a doozy. Let's get right into it. The New England Patriots absolutely dominate the Washington Commanders here in the preseason opener, 48-18. This had a little bit of high school football vibes. Friday night, got the weekend off, and the Patriots absolutely came out and torched the Washington Commanders for 48 points and played pretty good defense on the other side of that. But one thing that stood out in particular is the Patriots coaching staff, as well as the players, were just energetic, and it really seemed like they wanted to send a message here in this opening game to this preseason, and that's certainly something that they did. I want to start off here with the offensive line. They absolutely controlled the line of scrimmage, and really all three units that were out there. The starting offensive line for the night was Will Campbell on the left side, who looked pretty good, got out on a couple of lead blocks. I believe Jared Wilson, the third-round center, was actually starting at left guard. I believe Ben Brown, former center from last year, actually got the start tonight at center. Right guard, I believe, was Michael Onwenu. And then on the right side, Morgan Moses actually was not playing. It was instead seventh-round rookie Marcus Bryant. And I would say that unit actually played really well tonight. And obviously that's a huge positive because of last year, the Patriots' offensive line was absolutely atrocious. But through training camp so far, a lot of the reporters are saying that this offensive line is gelling and it is playing a lot better. And whether you want to credit the upgraded talent or the coaching staff, I probably believe it's a bit of both. This offensive line might look to help out this offense a little bit compared to where last year they were just an absolute detriment. And if Morgan Moses can prove to stay healthy throughout this year, I think this offensive line is going to be more than serviceable. And if Drake May wants to make that second-year leap, I really do think that this offensive line is going to be the key to that. Not only from a pass block standpoint, but the way that they ran the ball tonight and their run blocking was just absolutely great. Ramondre Stevenson was hitting holes. Travion Henderson, I'll get started on him in a minute, but just absolutely energetic. The speed to the outside on that toss, the way they were getting out in front, like I said before, Will Campbell later on in the game, DeMontre Jacobs on those kind of halfback tosses to the outside. This offensive line was moving. They had some motion. They had some pulling of the guards. It really did look like the old Patriots offense under Brady, as well as even under Mac Jones at times. And that's certainly going to be refreshing here if this offense can continue to put up points like they did tonight. Obviously, tonight's going to be a little unreasonable with the amount of production that you had, as well as going up against Washington's second stringers with your starting unit. But hey, you got to face who's out there. And I would say that the offensive line, even the depth at the offensive line that we sometimes question, especially at the tackle positions, really looked like they all had a great game from all three units. And the Patriots were able to move the ball, whether it was running, pass blocking, and there was certainly a ton of plays to be made. And for the most part, this Patriots offense was able to convert on it for the majority of the night, which gets us into our how did Drake May look? I would say that Drake May had a little bit of a mixed night. Obviously, that first drive, there was some good, some bad, but you really just don't want to see him turn the ball over. And unfortunately, he did have a fumble. The one question I had on the offensive line on that play, not going to lie, I wasn't 100% certain what that breakdown was. I'm not sure if it was more so Drake May holding on to the ball for a longer period of time, or I'm not sure if Washington was able to create a little bit of pressure on the left side. If they did, I do believe that Washington used the stunt, and there were several times throughout the joint practices this week that some of the guys on the left side, considering the fact that they're both rookies, that being Will Campbell and Jared Wilson, did have a little bit of struggles with guarding some stunts. So maybe Washington was able to kind of create some pressure in that aspect, but either way, Drake May has to be safer with the ball, obviously fumbling there. I know he's trying to get rid of the ball, but hey, guess what? It's a fumble anyways, and you have to eliminate the turnovers, and that's a huge question mark with Drake May coming into this year two. If he's able to take that year two leap, he has to cut down on the turnovers, and unfortunately for him, that's not a good sign when you turn the ball over on your opening drive. However, defense does a really nice job forcing a 3-and-out. Milton Williams and Tonga got some really good pressure up the middle. I'll get into them later. But the offense gets the ball back and they're able to drive down the field, whether it's through just taking profit after profit with run plays. Ramondre Stevenson had some good runs, like I said before. Travion Henderson, that big toss to the outside. Gibson was running well on the night. And also Drake May himself, whenever he spots man coverage, he does a real nice job when the offensive line gives him protection of keeping his eyes down the field. And I understand that they want him to keep being a passer. However, he did a real nice job tonight with balancing his legs, and he took off for a couple of scrambles of 10-plus yards, even one that got him into the end zone there. So it just looks like Drake May is going to be understanding of pocket awareness, looks really good. And I would say even at points last year, it looked like he had a pretty good pocket awareness. But under this Josh McDaniels system, with Brady, Josh McDaniels did not have that tool to play. But whenever Drake May spots man coverage and sees the backs of defenders, he's able to take off. And that's another element that really this Josh McDaniels offense never has had before outside of the year that Cam Newton was here. But at that point, Cam Newton really was not the same thrower that Drake May is now. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens and if Josh McDaniels is going to be maybe designing some more quarterback runs or just in general plays where he's going to allow to get Drake May in space and take off if he sees the backs of the defenders. But moving on here, it looked like Jeff Wilson or Jared Wilson as well as Will Campbell had really good nights on the left side outside of that play. But like I said before, it might have been Drake May holding onto the ball for too long. But outside of that play, they both looked really engaged in the run blocking. And that in particular is where the Patriots kind of stood out with me with the starting unit. Their run block game really was a highlight from what I've taken away with some of the joint training practices with Washington, and that continued on tonight. That left side was moving people, not only the left side, just the offensive line in general. But it's a really good sign if this team is able to run. That's going to allow them to get the play action game involved. And when this team is clicking and hitting play action plays, it really does become one of those more difficult offenses to stop. And then you add Drake May's element to running as well, and that becomes a top 10 offense potentially. And I'm really excited to see if this offensive line can continue all the momentum that they set tonight. But moving on to some of the other rookies along the line, Travion Henderson absolutely stole the show. How can you not start with him? 100-plus yard kickoff return. First play of the Patriots season technically, and he absolutely just shows off everything that made him that second-round pick. His explosiveness, his quickness, the speed, all the above, great blocking. Jeffrey Springs has to be ecstatic tonight. All the kickers made their kicks. Antonio Gibson had a big return, and of course Travion Henderson, massive return to start off this game. And how could you not get hyped? That place was bumping, I'm sure, and the entire bit of offense, that just juiced up everyone on that sideline, and it really carried throughout the game. So what a play by the rookie, and he's obviously the big game winner here. He definitely stood out the most, just his explosiveness, even at the backfield. The way he was lowering his shoulder to finish runs, showing off strength and his quickness. Added on top of that, I mean, this guy's going to be a menace in this backfield with Antonio Gibson, Ramondre Stevenson, and then Travion Henderson. That's going to be a three-headed monster. Every single one of them brings different elements, but the big play potential, it's going to come from Henderson. So I'm excited to see how Josh McDaniels is really going to introduce him into this offense even more than he was tonight. And I'm sure he's going to get a ton more looks based off what he showed tonight. So moving on here next to the wide receivers, of course, this is another big competition battle here. And the three that were out there to start off the game was Kayshon Boutte, who I'm sure has kind of locked himself up as a roster spot. All throughout training camp thus far, he's been one of the most consistent wide receivers. You have Pop Douglas out there, who's absolutely been racking up targets throughout training camp. And then you have Matt Collins, kind of that deep threat as well as that big slot receiver, who I'm sure you can put all over the offense. He actually had himself a deep target tonight. Unfortunately, they were unable to connect. But if you add Stephon Diggs into that equation, that's a pretty solid top four. And each one of them can bring their own blend here. And I was really also impressed with the depth of the wide receiver position and just how many bodies the Patriots are going to have on the back end of this roster. And the Patriots honestly might be forced to keep 6-7 wide receivers based off how some of those guys performed tonight. I thought Kyle Williams actually had a pretty good game. And unfortunately, in the stat sheet, it shows that he doesn't have a catch. However, I thought he got open 3 times, 2 times deep on go routes, and Josh Dobbs just absolutely missed him or underthrew him. And then one time in the red zone, where it was man coverage, he gave himself a nice outside move into a slant route, and Josh Dobbs just couldn't give him the ball on time. It was thrown high and away, and unfortunately, Kyle Williams could not come up with that catch. But I thought that Kyle Williams did a real nice job using his speed and his leverage to get inside separation or outside separation based off his routes tonight. And that's certainly a good sign because the more speed that you have with this offense, it's only going to help, especially with the big plays. And I think if this offense is going to generate big plays this season, I think the two rookies, Travion Henderson as well as Kyle Williams, are going to probably have to be your best two playmakers to do that because unfortunately some of the other guys on this roster just aren't that well equipped in terms of explosiveness. So it's a good sign to see those two rookies pass with flying colors on the night. But also talking about some other wide receivers, unfortunately for the 2024 draft class, Jalen Polk goes down with another injury. I really just don't see him anywhere on this roster. It just has not worked out for him here in New England. And I was really high on him and Javon Baker. Javon Baker didn't have a terrible game by any means. He did have a drop on a contested ball, so I don't really fault him with that, not making that catch as the ball was tipped. But he did make a couple of special teams tackles, but they're really just not making plays that other guys are. And I would be surprised if either one of them makes this roster. However, I will say that Javon Baker apparently has been making some noise in training camp. So hopefully that's a sign that he's taken a step forward and maybe we could see more production on the field throughout the rest of the preseason. But as of right now, I would say it's not looking good for either one of the wide receivers draft class from last year. But talking about some of the other wide receivers, some guys who stole the show late in the game, going to compete for that 5 or 6 spot, maybe guys like Efton Chisholm, who had himself a very nice game, coming up with 6 receptions on 8 targets for 50 yards and a touchdown, played really well. I can really see him making this back end of this roster, or at least being a practice squad candidate, just because of how he moves in the slot. And say if a guy like Pop Douglas goes down, I do think that the Patriots would have confidence in a guy like Efton Chisholm to kind of step into that role. But speaking more on the back end of the wide receivers, guys like, I believe it's John Giles actually came up with 2 big catches, as well as Jeremiah Webb. They both had 2 catches for 48 yards and 41 yards. A couple of inside breaking routes across the middle of the field where both of them came up with nice catches. So this 6th, 7th roster spot, if they want to carry 7 wide receivers, these are guys who might be putting their names in the applications just because of how they played tonight. So good for them. Hopefully they can continue the momentum going into the Vikings training camp. But let's move over to the defensive side of the ball here. I would say that the biggest positive on the night for the defense for me in general was the secondary depth, particularly at the cornerback position. I think we know what we have in Alex Austin. I think he's that good third serviceable corner on the outside who can come in, play some mix-up downs if one of your top 2 corners needs a rest or goes down with injury. But guys like DJ James, who's been having a really good training camp reportedly, I thought he did a really nice job with playing some pretty sticky coverage. Obviously, he had that interception on the play where the wide receiver fell down. But I also thought that he was a very sure tackler, and I'm sure that's something that Mike Vrabel wants to bring to this defense. There's also being plays made from a bunch of other guys. I saw that Craig Woodson was in the backfield at times. He was making some nice plays. He did, unfortunately, let a running back escape from him with a stiff arm, so his tackling is going to have to shore up a little bit. However, I felt that guys like Marcus Epps, the safety from the Raiders last season, had a very nice game as well. Also, guys like Del Pettis had some pretty big hits in there. And I thought that Marte Mapu was actually running a little bit with the linebackers. Thought he was playing pretty solid in coverage. Of course, he actually forced an incompletion on a really good coverage play where the tight end almost made a really good catch. However, Vrabel threw the challenge flag and showed that the ball did hit the ground. So I would say that the coverage on the night from the Patriots secondary in general was very impressive to me. However, that does bring me over to a little bit of a question mark. Not with the starting pass rush unit, because I thought that Milton Williams in particular on either the 1 or 2 drives that he was in did make his imprint felt, as well as Tyrus Tonga, the big nose tackle, had himself a pressure when Milton Williams was getting doubled. But I thought that the depth of the pass rush tonight really failed to get home, and I thought that the secondary did a really nice job in coverage to kind of cover up a lot of what the pass rush was failing to do. However, I will say that Washington was getting the ball out pretty quick. So to give a little bit of the benefit to those defenders, guys like Farmer, the 4th round defensive tackle pick, also like Brady Swinson, LSU edge defender in the 5th round. Want to see those guys pop off a little bit more. I think that they both still have a very good chance to make this roster. if not the practice squad. But I'd like to see them kind of enter their names in the chat a little bit here. But overall, I say that the defense had themselves a very good game. At the starting unit, you see guys like Robert Spillane. I saw Jack Gibbons get into the fray a little bit every once and now, but guys like Jalen Hawkins in particular early on in the game was really stepping up. And even the coverage team kind of noticed how they were playing a lot of 3 safety looks, with Jabril Peppers even coming down, playing more so that box safety look. Kyle Duggar and Jalen Hawkins kind of being both the deep safeties there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Terrell Williams and Mike Vrabel kind of coin this defense. And I really do think that the Patriots believe in their secondary depth here, especially at the safety position. It's probably one of their more stronger units. And if a guy like Kyle Duggar is able to rebound after the year he had last year, this defense is going to be a top 10 defense, especially when you add Carlton Davis and Gonzo with the man coverage skills that both them have and the amount of disguising looks you could have in the secondary with the safeties. It might force offenses to really think about throwing the ball, and it might allow for the pass rush to really tee off and get to the quarterback. But my one big question with the defense is, this year in particular, is going to be how they're going to be attacking the run game. Of course, they kind of switch schemes, but that was a huge issue last year with this Patriots team. And when they brought in guys like Milton Williams, who is a great pass rusher, he's not necessarily known for his run stuffing ability. Of course, he didn't get the biggest chance of that in Philadelphia, but guys like Carl Landry, Milton Williams, and even familiar faces, guys like Anthony Jennings, who's usually a pretty solid run defender, and Keon White, if those guys are going to be able to really stuff the run, this defense is going to have a ton of potential, because then you're going to be able to divert your linebackers away from the line of scrimmage. And what the Patriots really showed tonight in the secondary is they want their linebackers to have depth on these third and long situations, guys like Jack Gibbons as well as Robert Spillane. And if they're able to do that and force teams in the third and long, granted, you could say this about any defense, but when you're forcing offenses in the third and long, especially with the coverage skills on this defense, they have some big play potentials if an offense tries to force the ball down the field. So I'm going to say that if this Patriots team is able to hold up in the run game, they are going to have an absolutely monster season on defense, which is only going to benefit the team as a whole. And don't get me started on the special teams tonight. Absolutely great. The blocking, the kicking, really anything with the special teams. Jeffrey Springs looking like he has those guys gunning. And honestly, I think that this team looked really great tonight. I'm excited to see if they're able to carry on this momentum into Minnesota, or if maybe they're due for a little bit of a drawback. But if you ask me right now, I cannot wait to see week 1 versus the Raiders, and hopefully this team comes out with the same amount of energy and playmaking that they had here to open up the preseason. All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And for the channel, I'm looking forward to making more of these Patriot breakdown videos. Can't wait for the season to start, as I said before. So hopefully I'll check you all out in the next one.